Meanwhile, after Michigan overruled and voted along party lines to get rid of right to work in the state of Michigan, it put a lot of folks in a tough spot where workers who were going into a job that was unionized, and maybe they didn't want to necessarily be a part of the union, or they didn't want to pay those dues. Well, that pretty much went out the door. Although there is still something that can be done. It's a deauthorization petition. Now, this is unfolding up in the Petoskey area. Mechanics, parts department workers, and other auto service related jobs and employees at Brown Motors. They're a Ford, Chrysler, Dodge, and Jeep dealer. They're seeking to end a Teamsters union official's ability to demand payment of dues, union dues, as a condition of their employment. One of the mechanics at Brown Motors has submitted a deauthorization petition to the National Labor Relations Board. And the group that is providing that legal aid is the National Right to Work Foundation. And Mark Mix is the president of the National Right to Work Foundation and joins me. Mark, it's good to have you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for that really good description of what's happening here.
Well, what I think is really interesting here, Mark, is I don't know that I've ever heard of a deauthorization petition. I thought if your state isn't a right-to-work state, then you go to a job that's unionized, you're going to pay the dues. It's part of the job. But I didn't know anything about a deauthorization petition. Can you explain that to me and what that entails?
Sure, and not many employees do know what their rights are under the federal law that was promulgated back in the 1930s. One of those rights is the ability to deauthorize union. Now, you're right, Chris. In the first place, in a right-to-work state, you don't have to go through this legal process when it comes to deauthorization. Basically, what a deauthorization does is it says that one particular part of the contract, which is the union security clause, it's usually the first or second paragraph of any union contract that gets imposed on workers or a small business or whatever that is, and it basically says this. It says within 30 days of someone gaining employment or within 30 days of this contract being executed, every worker in that particular workplace must pay union dues or fees or they will be terminated. Now, for the last decade in Michigan, that type of language did not exist in any contract because you were a right-to-work state. But even then, even without that language, any worker in a particular state, whether it be right-to-work or not, can agree to voluntarily pay union dues, and lots of workers do because they like what their union's doing. They're very actively involved in their unions. But to your point, as you made at the introduction, there are workers there to say, you know what, I'm not interested in supporting the UAW, for example, a couple of years back when they were having some real trouble with keeping track of the money. If you remember, I won't go any farther than that, but there was a lot of legal action back then. And one of the ways that workers can hold union officials accountable is by withholding dues. So this deauthorization can occur that says we're going to take that language out of the contract, and we're going to say you can't force us to pay union dues or fees to keep our jobs. That can happen in a non-right-to-work state, and obviously in a right-to-work state it's not necessary. So obviously union officials aren't telling workers they have this right. Most times businesses aren't telling their workers they have this right, because if they do, that's an unfair labor practice charge. If the employer ever kind of directs employees about doing this, it has to be completely independent of the employer. The unions aren't going to tell you about it. And so a worker who may be upset with this idea that they now have to pay union dues or fees in Michigan or lose their jobs, they're saying, hey, let's see if we can challenge this. Deauthorization is one of the ways they can do that.
All right, so let me get back to that momentarily. So as for the workers at Brown Motors up in the Petoskey area, they don't want to pay these dues to the Teamsters. What is the issue here? What are they claiming as a reason for filing this deauthorization petition?
Well, I think they're saying that the union's not being responsive to them, and probably what happened is when they repealed the right-to-work law, when the repeal went into effect in February, they started having a payroll deduction taken out of their paychecks again, saying, hey, what is this $50 coming out of my paycheck this month? Or what is this $30 coming on my paycheck this month? And they were told, look, this is Teamster union dues. Now that the right to work law has been repealed, the contract has this little secret door that says immediately upon right to work being repealed, this union security clause, this requirement that you pay dues or fees to the union within 30 days of employment or 30 days of a contract, being deployed on you, you get fired if you don't pay it. So they probably looked at it and said, what the heck is this? And, it can be different for lots of people. Sometimes it's, hey, we don't like what the union's doing with our money. Sometimes it's the union's not representing us. Sometimes the union is doing bad things. All of those things can be a driver of the workers saying, we want to deauthorize the union. In this case, they're not doing what's called a decertification, Chris. A decertification is when you throw the union out completely. You throw the whole union out, and then you're able to talk to your employer again and negotiate your own contract with your employer in a situation like that. So you have a deauthorization, which takes away the forced dues and fees, and a decertification, which would remove the union from the workplace.
Meantime, this vote that they're going to take, talk to me a little bit about the nuts and bolts. So where do we go from here? So does the NLRB already have this? Where are we at in this process, and then what's next?
Yeah, so the petition has gone to the NLRB, the regional office there, and it has a majority of the employees that have signed this petition asking for this secret ballot election. So what should happen is once the NLRB verifies that these people are eligible to sign the petition, and then a majority of those have basically said, well, actually, it doesn't have to be a majority. It can be as little as 30% of the workforce can say we'd like this vote. But in this case, there's a majority of the workers that sign the petition. So there should be a secret ballot election scheduled, and the NLRB will count the votes. And this is the really nuance here, Chris, and it's good that you drill down in this a little bit, because in a certification election, when the union's trying to get in, all you have to do is get a majority of the workers that vote. So if you have 100 people in a workforce, let's say 25 vote and 13 vote for the union, 13 people have locked all 100 people into the union. A deauthorization vote, though, however, the rule is written that you have to get a majority of everyone in a bargaining unit. So if you want to do a deauthorization, you have 100 people in the workplace, then 51 people have to vote for deauthorization. Otherwise, you lose the deauthorization vote. So it's really easy to get into a union. It's very difficult to get out. And this is one of those examples where, hey, you want to withdraw the ability for the union to collect forced fees and dues from you, or you'd be fired, and you have to get a majority of everyone in the unit. So it'll be a little tougher standard for getting out of this forced dues payments than it would be to get in with the union with a simple majority of those voting. But we'll help them, guide them through this process. And so the election should be conducted. They should count the votes. And if you get a majority of everyone in the unit, then the union security clause will go away.
Does it look like they've got the numbers for this?
I think so. I mean, when a majority of the workers sign the petition, that's a pretty good signal, but it doesn't guarantee anything. There's certain things that happen between now and the election that obviously make a difference. We have these all the time with workers across the country, and we never know, but that's the secret of a secret ballot election, Chris, for sure.
No doubt. I've got 30 seconds left. Are we starting to see more of these cases pop up across Michigan?
We are, absolutely. We got several of them pending right now. One from guards all across the state, one for a Kroger employee. We got all kinds of things going on in Michigan and lots of calls coming in.
Interesting. Mark Mix with the National Right to Work Foundation. Let's stay in touch. Keep me updated on everything that's going on.
We'll do it, Chris. Thank you.
You got it. That's Mark Mix, the president of the National Right to Work Foundation.